Really should have like a glass of wine or something for these evening webinars.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we will once they're in person.
Yeah, even better. Getting tired,
Eventually.
getting tired of the webinar. I want to be hopping on a plane here and going up to the Bay Area to do this presentation.
Yeah, it's so different sitting here in a virtual waiting room, like kind of watching the participants' numbers go up versus sitting in a room kind of at the front, half on a table, chatting, just kind of getting a feel for the room coming in, man. I miss that so much.
I do too.
So I want to make sure that I'm aware of what the participants are doing. I don't see any participants.
They're starting to tick up if you look now. On the participants bar, you'll start to see we're at 8 participants now.
Okay.
On this one, it'll actually count us because we're using a meeting, which is actually kind of nice. It's a good way to do it.
Okay. Okay.
All right. We got about 8 people. You can see who
Good.
they are.
Okay. Welcome to those of you who are already joining us early.
Yeah, and they'll just roll in. It's not even 6 yet, so.
Or 5.
Sorry, yeah, different time zone for me. That's the other one. It's kind of nice. You do the East Coast after hours presentations. It's like 3 o'clock for me. It's perfect. It's truly happy hour. So, Dave, this is you guys' first one, so this will be a little bit fun kicking it off for kind of a virtual. You guys is it one a month? How are you guys running it?
It's one a month.
Cool.
And this initiative on the part of the AIA San Francisco to have a new design tech committee comes from the integration of the former technology committee with a separate organization outside the AIA that decided that it would be better to combine with the AIA. It was called SFCDI, the San Francisco Computer Design Institute.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I'll wait until just a few minutes afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm interested in who is already showing up. If you could introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. Then everybody can know who's participating. I have already put in the chat my name. I guess I will add my contact information here so that you can feel free to suggest any topics or co-presenters in the future that you think that you would like the committee to take on. Okay, hi Anna, joining from LA.
Hello.
Hi Ben. Your name is familiar. Do you work at Boulder? Am I right?
Hey, how's it going? I actually do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I remember you.
Yeah. Which project have you worked together? The project? I don't remember.
No, I met you at an AIA party.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Good to call in.
Cool. Hi, Michael, Adrian, Paul, Allison. Okay, we'll get started in a second here. Okay. I know that people will continue to come in. So we won't hear from our co-presenters for a couple minutes while I tell you a little bit about the committee, the design tech committee here, and what I'm doing with it. So my name is Dave Alpert. I'm an experienced architect from San Francisco. I've worked for a lot of different firms, including SOM, Gensler, HGA. And now I have founded a technology company called GeoPogo, which you're invited to check out at our website. And I'm among a growing group of people who are devoting ourselves to bringing design technology to the AIA San Francisco membership and beyond. So these meetups will be open to anyone in the community, and they will be cross promoted with other organizations so that we have a good mix, not just architects and designers coming to the design tech events. So these will be the third Wednesday of every month throughout the year. Once it's safe, then we'll be meeting face to face. But for now, we're meeting virtually. And so today, for the first one of our meetups, we're going to focus on data-driven decision making. Because with technology, we have a greater opportunity than ever before to gather data. And then the question is, what do we do with that data? And how can it make our everyday work so much more effective, better informed? And to talk about that, we have two wonderful co-presenters. We have Chris Jervey, who is the Director of Business Development for Struction Site, and Jeff Sample, who is the Head of Communications for Join. Now, both of these companies, Struction Site and Join, seem to be more generally focused on construction. But let's think of design and construction as one activity that is integrated in terms of its intent and the product that's being created. And the data that comes from construction and is fed to construction is also relevant to designers. And the data that is collected for designers is also relevant to builders. So this is a kind of a collaboration moment. I'll tell you a little bit more about Chris. He has 25 years in construction project management, sales, and business development, starting as a carpenter's apprentice. And he partners with architecture and construction companies and organizations. Jeff also has more than 20 years optimizing construction companies and has the distinction of being the Iron Man of IT. So maybe when we get to see Jeff, we'll see some of the Iron Man. Okay, so my understanding, unless I'm mistaken, Chris, you're going to go first?
Actually, I'm going to let Jeff get started, and I think he's going to
Okay.
go through
Okay,
some of the objectives quick. I think this is part of the CE stuff.
Okay, great. And I want to emphasize to everybody, this is not a webinar format. This is a meeting format. And we want everybody to be raising questions and jumping in. Please don't ever feel like it's, not the right moment or something. Just raise your hand. And if you're more comfortable, you can use the chat, and then I'll pick up the questions or comments from chat.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. This is very much an industry conversation, and Chris and I both come from construction and technology backgrounds, but you hit the nail on the head, Dave. This is a unique industry that's currently a bit bifurcated, but ultimately we all need to work as one organism so that we can really take advantage of all the things we're going to talk about. And with AIA objectives, these are here for you to understand the approach to analyzing data and collecting data, identify decision-making impacts, understand the importance of defining data standards, and then, some specific examples really to meet those objectives. So hopefully we've done that for you. A quick on me. So I am the head of communications here at Join. Like Dave Alpert said, I am also known as the Iron Man of IT. That is because I race the triathlon Ironmans, not the Tony Stark, although for these presentations, it'd probably be better if I went the Tony Stark route. And so I think it's 5 or 6 years ago, I got the moniker on the Contact Trio, which is now known as the Contact Crew. I'm also a podcaster on the Construction Dorks. For me, I'm passionate about this industry, everybody reaching in, grabbing hold of the rope and pulling it in the same direction. I've worked for trades, suppliers. I got my start in the trades as a technologist, and have done software development, et cetera. So I believe that you have to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes to understand. It gives you better perspective. So hopefully I can answer and be here for those kind of questions. And I was excited that Chris could join me. So Chris, introduce yourself a little bit and, tell the world what you're about.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I see some names on this list that I recognize. So hello to those of you that we've worked together before. Hi there. Nice to see you all again. Like I said, I started out in construction management. Actually started out swinging a hammer for a few years until, much like the triathlon, I couldn't do that stuff anymore. Went into construction management and then was in that for a long time. And then, 09, when things kind of hit the wall, found a little startup out here in Pasadena called Bluebeam, which wasn't a little startup for very long. I had an awesome ride there and have been over with Struction Site, doing site-based documentation work for the last 2.5 years. And really, again, to kind of reiterate Jeff's point, what it really is about for me is bringing people together, not just around, cool ideas, but really trying to figure out how we bridge the gap between information share, technology share. Data isn't, we're going to talk a little bit about data being kind of a scary term, I think, for people, but data is really just process, and data is really just, people. It's really just a way to bring people together. It doesn't belong to anybody. In fact, it really has to be shared among various project partners. And so the ability to kind of work with design teams and build teams and facility management and owner groups, everybody has, an important voice to play in these projects, and everybody needs information because we're all in the business of improving these projects. And so the goal really is to be rid of, I feel like this is Joe Biden's speech today here. Is to bring a certain amount of unity to the whole process. So really want to just kind of take some of the barriers, continue to break the barriers down and bring people together to just improve that. And in this case, I think we'll talk a little bit more about just how we can gather and share data to make better decisions as a team, not just at certain very specific points in time, but also throughout the entire building life cycle. And that's what we're going to focus a lot on that. So this really isn't about construction. This really isn't about design. This really isn't about facility management. It's about all those things throughout the entire life of a building. So look forward to spending the next 45 minutes or so with you all.
Awesome, Chris. I love the idea of an organism. It is a life cycle, especially given some of the new means and methods and materials we're seeing come about in the industry. They are breathing, they are doing things, but we do always give an option, and Chris, are going to have a little fun. So hopefully you guys are understanding this is after hours. We want to have fun. We want to educate, but technology is exponentially accelerating. What does that mean? It means if you're not changing, adapting, and becoming a part of it, then you are slowly becoming irrelevant. So we want you to join in with us, but we do give you the option. I just watched this movie with my son, so I felt like I should put it in here. If you take the blue pill, you can go back, sit in your room and forget this ever happened, and we'll let you wake up tomorrow. If you want to take the red pill, Chris and I are here to show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. And unlike the Matrix, you won't fall out the bottom and end up going backwards. I believe you're going to learn a lot more about where we can go. So with that, I want to just kind of touch into, the different types of data that exist out there. There's structured data and unstructured data. Structured data is just exactly what we know. It's organized. It typically is in a database of some sort. As it grows and as modern data storage and technologies have gone out there, they have morphed some, but ultimately they still follow a lot of those rules from the structured data that we can query them and get information from them directly. And then there's this thing of unstructured data. You know, those are your videos, your photos, those things that just sort of grow in the wild that create their own habitat. So those are the two we're going to be talking about, and you can't ignore any one from the other. There are moments in time where you'll need to make decisions around, do you go structured, do you go unstructured? And actually there's lots of technology that are bridging those gaps too. So how your data is structured matters. And, you know, Chris, you started with Bluebeam, and it was an understanding of taking, you know, say Bluebeam's unstructured PDF world and turning it into more of a structured metadata idea, right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because this is the second, you know, this is the second major sort of construction technology company that I've been in. And when you think about the source issues, the source problems that we're trying to solve, that we were trying to solve at Bluebeam, you know, 10, 11 years ago, and the source problems that we're trying to solve right now at Struction Site, it's, you know, what do I do with all this paper? I can't share this with people, you know, unless I roll them up in a tube and take them over to the reprographic shop, roll them up in a tube and ship them to somebody else, right? Like, these were not really complex issues. This was just about trying to digitize a paper-based, you know, a series of paper-based workflows. Right now, what we're talking about is, oh, shoot, yeah, we need to take a bunch of pictures. So now I just go out there and somebody just has like a, you know, an Olympus circa 2010 camera, high quality camera, and they run around taking pictures of floors and ceilings. And, you know, ultimately that's data. Images are data for sure, but they're just not structured at all. So what we're trying to do is just provide context, right? We're just trying to structure the data. And in this case, it's not even necessarily a database, right? It's just better than a folder full of IMG based files, you know, files that start with IMG and then just are, you know, impossible to find anything. So just providing location context, right? That structure right there, time and date context on top of a floor plan. So yeah, it's really amazing to me. And I think what's crazy about this too, Jeff, is like, this feels scary to me already. Just like, oh, a database, right? Like, oh, okay, shoot, what do I do with a database, right? Like, how is this actually usable data, right? Like, I almost prefer unstructured because at least I know it's just an IMG file in a folder, and I can go in there and open up and take a look through. Like, once it gets into some sort of like, some sort of database, I'm supposed to know some sort of language. I'm supposed to know programming, right? I think the funny part is that, like, structured data doesn't necessarily even have to mean, oh, are you able to organize a database for yourself? It's just, is there a certain context for that information that allows you to sort, filter, access, manage information in a way that's easy for you? And then I think we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, what does post-structured data look like, right? What is it where it's just, you know, where machines and artificial intelligence are starting to tell you, instead of having to go to the database for the information for the structured data, the structured data is going to find an outlet to tell you in advance that these are the things that you should be looking out for. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that later in the chat.
Awesome. Well, no, I agree with you. And there's a lot to it. And Chris probably scared a few of you. You know, my favorite thing is this world opened up to me when I joined the construction industry, and the first person showed me a model. I thought it was cool, but I really didn't understand it until somebody showed me the database behind it, and that it really was just a database, and that I could take it and pivot it into Azure and do things with it. So that really turned a light bulb on, and I've kind of dedicated myself to understanding where we are. So I want to talk, and again, we're gonna go back and forth, ask your questions as you see fit, but we're really about being interactive. So given where Chris sits in the continuum, he wants to talk a little bit about project data and the things that we're creating on the construction side, right? So Chris, why don't you kind of take it away and talk a little bit about project data and the whys behind why we might want to be doing that.
Yeah, so I'm going to just sort of talk a little bit about this through the lens of Struction Site and what we and other, you know, site documentation tools are really looking to try to enhance. And I'll sort of expand, I think, on different construction workflows that are ultimately really nothing more than project data gathering. But if we think a little bit about what information we start with, right? Whether that's, a 2D set of floor plans or a model that we have with some level of detail. We don't know exactly what level. It's going to differ for different types of jobs, projects, et cetera. And we're going to talk a little bit about, what do we do? We have that as a starting place, right? We're going to build off of that. Great. So fantastic. That in and of itself is some amount of project data. But as you know, we've got a schedule. We've got, we've got a budget. We've got, a whole bunch of other pieces of, contractual documentation that ultimately make up the project and the data that ultimately fuels that project. When you start thinking a little bit more about reality capture, right? When you start thinking about like, okay, what are we actually doing? What's the point of taking photos, right? Again, right now we're sort of living in a world that's like, okay, well, we know we need to take photos because we need to be able to address a problem that comes up by having some sort of a historical record of the installation work that took place at some point, right? So in this particular instance, the floor plan, right, as project data is going to live in concert with a series of progress photos that were captured via a video camera or through an iPad or through a really nice 360 photography camera, et cetera. And then they're going to link those to the project floor plan so that I can kind of see, all right, if I'm standing in this particular room, I can go through from February 2018 to November 2021, and I can sort of see how this project changed over the course of time. And when I get a leak because somebody hit a pipe, or if I have no idea whether or not there's any backing or something else that I might need in behind a wall that I can no longer see behind, what we're doing is we're providing new amounts of data that are actually not just planned data, but actual data. And we think a lot about the process and kind of what we were talking about earlier on, which is you've got plan, you've got install, you've got maintain, right? Throughout the building life cycle, you're going to start with a plan, and then you're actually going to build whatever you're supposed to build. Reality capture is we sort of joke, we joke about it at Instruction Site as, well, those are your as-builts, the photos. I mean, sure, of course, you're going to want to have plans because eventually you're going to want to use those plans for other things down the road. But you want to know how it was actually built? Well, here are the photos that show you that information. So, there's data in there because it provides you with information about actual locations, actual time and date information. All that stuff is really important. The funny part about, I think, reality capture data is people think of it as something that they have to do because we have a leak and I need to figure out what's happening there, or I need a bunch of information from my designer. And so I'm going to use a photo to generate a workflow like an RFI or an observation or something that, ultimately might start inside a photo. Like, hey, I'm going to circle this little area and say, what is this? I need some more information here. Or change management, stuff that's happening. All those things are very reactive, right? It's all information that's like, oh shoot, this is going to slow me down, or I've got to respond to a particular issue. Well, reality capture can be, and we'll get into this a little bit further down the road. And actually in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but like that project data, for instance, that is actually just sort of photo evidence, evidentiary data, photo-based information, that can also be we can also generate point clouds, right, from this kind of information. So rather than, here's kind of what the whole point of this kind of conversation, I think, ultimately sort of, hovers around is, if I can generate a point cloud, for instance, from a video walk, which is a tool that we have in Instruction Site that allows you to just video record a site walk and generate 360 photos out of it. If I could generate a point cloud, let's say, of a whole bunch of rebar before I pour the concrete, and if I could run that against a model and it says, hey, these particular pieces are not where they need to be. You may not catch that with the human eyeball, but the machine might catch it. And we're going to talk about this a little bit down the road too, but in this conversation. But then instead of chipping away a bunch of concrete, right, I have the ability to actually more proactively use information at my disposal to avoid. So it's about being proactive and not about being reactive. So point clouds again, and drone footage and laser scans that might also generate point clouds. There's a number of pieces of reality capture that again are all just pieces of project data throughout the course of construction that we want to use against the actual design data to kind of just continue to make sure we understand what's being built versus what we actually planned to build to begin with.
Yeah, and so at the beginning, Dave, you kind of talked about the different silos, and those silos exist across, design to construction, but they actually exist in construction too, guys. So you'll have construction that has the general contractors and everybody's a different trade. And we want to democratize the information. That was the term I like to use when it comes to making it available to everyone, because right now what Chris is talking about is maybe one contractor, the general contractor, is using construction site to gather data, and maybe the mechanical trade is using laser scans and Faro type technology or other types of reality capture, and then somebody else is using drones, and the electrical is using something else, and you're able to combine that information before you do a pour, because when you do a complicated pour like this, there's piping for electrical, for mechanical, for plumbing, for wastewater, for other things that need to be there. And it is really hard. There's no one group that really understands all of that. So by democratizing that information and then comparing it against the models themselves, you have the opportunity to get ahead. Right now, data-driven decision makings, you have a decision to make about whether or not you pour. And the moment you pour that concrete, you are not going back without lots of money. And trust me, I came from the concrete trade. The worst thing you can do, I mean, Chris, you said this, pre-call was like, well, it's great to know that I have a photo that says, well, shoot, this is where it was, but this is where it should be. And I can at least go not ruin the whole slab. That's good. Like that's a step forward. But how about we take that second and third step and we prevent that rework? If you really look at we talk about this industry being a low margin business of its own design. Well, the largest bucket that we can prevent is rework. And we all want to prevent not only physical rework, but digital rework as well. Having to come all the way back to you, the designer, because we poured something differently or something came out differently, and having to have you redo the designs or put more time into it is rework in and of itself. There's no one that doesn't benefit from us, measuring twice, cutting once type mentality.
Yeah, can I jump in there for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
To just share what the magnitude of that rework is, it's $1 billion every day in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And architects, where do you think that money comes from? A lot of it comes out of the design budget. That's why the design gets chipped back. So everybody has an interest in reducing the rework. And
I mean, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, because we're going to come back to it, but contractually tying yourself to the winds is, in my opinion, the way that this industry will pull the rope in the same direction. I think we're all actually kind of spoke and wheel. We're all around the bag of money and we're all trying to pull in our own direction. And I actually think we all lose out. There's things slipping through the cracks. Who knows where they're going? Somebody's got a boat somewhere named Change Order or something of that nature. That's really capitalizing on this. That I would rather that go and be spread across everyone. So, Chris, anything else? I didn't want to jump and take that from you, but I love the progression of, at first you got to take that first step. Then we're talking about evolving it. And it's really about creating a point cloud of data to compare against the model, so that ultimately we know we don't build what we draw. It's never happened. Yeah. But we're pretty close.
And getting closer, I think. I mean, I do think that there is, because there's, because there's a continuous, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves either, but because there's a kind of a continuous evolution and movement towards, more data up front is better for the success and health of the project downstream. Like, we are getting more and better data up front. These things we are gonna get, more, we're going to get more complete information, so that we're not kind of like, oh wait, what about that? What about that? We will have this, but it is a process. It's absolutely a process. And we have to try to figure out how we can build, continue to build the sort of overall data warehouse for any given type of project as we go, so that we have more for the next one. So yeah, I'll leave it on that one.
I love that. And so from my perspective, if you guys aren't familiar with Join, and of course, each of us, we're not here to sell you our products, but we come from our perspective. So our unique perspective is where I work now is in pre-construction. And that seems odd to most because I came from the trades. But I really felt that in order to continue to move the industry forward and be a part of pulling in the direction I want to see us go, and I think will be the most beneficial, I had to join in and bring my knowledge to the general contractor side, but mainly around pre-construction and around design. And that really key phase to me, I saw a great graph from someone recently that said, 80% of impact is generated in design, but it's only 20% of pre-construction, of the cost of a project, versus 20% of impact during construction and 80% of the cost, which means at the point of pre-construction, when we are evaluating our decisions and looking at the processes and looking at what we're capable of doing, that is the moment in which we can have the most impact. For me, it's about when we can do quite a lot of things for the future, basing our models as they get more detailed, as they get more constructible, as we become more collaborative. We have an opportunity to drive new means and methods, right? That bulk of rework is happening outside of our control sometimes too. It's happening in prefabrication and in modular design, where we want to implement and use those technologies, but there's a fear of doing it because of just that it's going to be drawn one way, it's going to be done one way, and a decision is going to be made down the road that's going to change and alter the ability to use the prefabricated materials. So we need to have those decisions and those impacts and that expertise at the table earlier, and have everybody collaborating on it, right? It's not about telling designers how to do it, or designers telling trades how to do it, or telling GCs how to do it. There is a vast amount of knowledge locked in each one of those silos, in their heads, in their data, that needs to be collaboratively put together so that we can transform and do things like find lost opportunities. Where can we make decisions early on in, say, HVAC units and mechanical, that we can combine and create single rooms to create more space for usable living that still drives the efficiencies and drives the needs of that building? In data centers, the ability to do unique power distribution systems and understand how those rooms can be fabricated off-site can increase your schedule, right? It's about looking for, where have we done, like, how many of you can think right now back on projects that you've done that then later on tell you, oh, in this project, I've done that before, and this really helped us out, or vice versa, to Chris's point, this really came back and bit us. Right now you're hanging on to that. We need that to be in a systematized data format, so that you can always go back to that and always look for those opportunities that you may have forgotten, and not really rely on your brain for that. But also, I love to talk about this when it comes to data and big data. Like, okay, none of you is probably sitting on any big data, right? Your ERP system's not big data. The building itself, as it generates zettabytes of information, that's big data. What Amazon is sitting on, that's big data. The only way the industry is going to get to big data, which can really drive insights for everybody and find lost opportunities across the board, is when we democratize and put all the information together. Yes, we have to take certain identifiable information out of that. That's security. But we've been doing that in other industries for quite a long time. And it's very easy to achieve data security standards and still get all of the insights that we need. And that's what we need. We need to be able to slice it in such a way that we not only understand how our companies do healthcare and our companies do higher ed, but how does the industry do higher ed? How does the industry do K through 12? And where are the innovations that they're finding that are really driving efficiencies, that are really driving a change? And how are we aligning ourselves to those goals and working together? And how are we decreasing our risk? How many of you know that every time you're trying a new mean or method, or you're trying to work with a new group, you're adding 5% here, 10% there, these contingency things that we all love to have to cover ourselves because we're going into the unknown, right? We can decrease that risk by unlocking the power of the data that's gone before us, by taking what Chris said, and we take our models and we take our as-built and our laser scans, reality capture, we take the constructible models and the specs that we've gotten from our trade contractors, and we put it all together. And then we go to the facilities management. We say, how did this run? You know, I was just working with a group that's kind of expanding its footprint from the Northeast down into South Florida and Georgia, and, you know, along those areas where it's going to be a very different temperature. So they're really interested in how do the HVAC systems work with this? You know, how can we get more information on it? And I said, you know, that's what here at Join, what we're trying to do on the pre-construction side of things is really give a collaborative project data warehouse so that we can do those kind of things down the road. We are not, there's, and by the way, should have said this earlier, there is no one single source of truth. That doesn't exist. Your truth comes through your perspective. There's no one solution to rule them all. Anybody who does that will sell you a bridge when they get off the phone with you on that one, because there isn't one thing, right? We are all a piece of the puzzle. And I've had a little fun with this because I don't know if you guys felt weird about Chris talking about construction before pre-construction, but I certainly did. That's like talking construction before design, right? We did that on purpose. We went out of order. And I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, but the industry kind of went out of order on this, right? Like we saw this boom in construction technology and the ability to, you know, get data and sensors and, you know, smarter buildings, et cetera. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What are we doing in pre-con? What are we doing in design to consume that information to drive in the right direction, right? We're kind of, the cart's kind of leading the horse right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Some of that, in my mind, has to do with construction being more consistently a methodical activity, whereas design has a strong creative aspect to it. And I think that people shy away from data to the extent that it might not be relevant to the specifics of their site or their client or their project. And so wanting to be open-minded about it.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. And who like, right. Like, I don't want to create epic generalizations here, but there is a sort of creative aspect, of course, to the design side, and a lot of folks want to be able to, on the design side, they want to be able to push the boundaries. They want to come up with new ideas. That absolutely should be the way that we focus on that. A lot of builders just want to get, you know, A and B connected, right? And because there's a sense of like, I just want it to be practical and tangible, and I want it to be done on time. And this is how I like to put pieces together. And I do puzzles, and I want to put this thing together. How many people are actually like on the research side, right? How many people, which if we go back to building lifecycle, is who's actually, you know, spending the time watching and testing the building as it performs and degrades over the many years. Like that information is super critical to the next iteration of design, but it doesn't feel circular at all. It
Right.
feels very linear. So you have a great idea by a super creative person. that is then translated through a variety of different designs and other pieces of information by a builder who might be incredibly talented, not just at, you know, the X's and Y's, or the X's and O's rather, of building a building, but in communicating with other project partners, in sequencing, in schedule management and resource management, you know, chain supply. And then it goes off to an owner or you know, a building management group. And what do they have? I mean, they got nothing but like, my building is getting worse every day I go into it, right? And then they spend some amount of time, and then that should ultimately feed into, you know, the next generation of design. Like, these performed better, these didn't perform as well, this type of design. And I'm not saying that we don't use that at all on the design side. Of course, there are people that are really interested in that and that are using that. I would guess that they're cutting edge, but I also think that we don't really even think about, we don't spend nearly as much time developing data around this big, huge, like, you're going to design for a year, a little bit of time, you're going to build for a little bit of time. In the grand scheme of the life of a building, it's mostly just going to run and be a building, right? The systems are going to run, people are going to open doors, sit on, you know, walk on floors, whatever. There's a lot of really valid data in that process, you know, in that time frame, which is the bulk majority of the life of that building, that we don't necessarily even do anything with. You want to talk about like who's really killing it in technology? It's not facility maintenance companies, right? I mean, sure, they're out there, but like, are they really generating data that could ultimately feed, you know, the new designs that are coming in? We've got to tie those ends of that circle together.
It could be. I mean, when I worked at Kaiser Permanente, a lot of the justifications for new sustainability measures came from maintenance costs. Rubber had a more expensive first cost than vinyl, but there was a lot of maintenance that was required for the vinyl to wax and strip it. And that was bad for the environment in itself.
So,
yeah. So, I mean, when you can get the facilities data, it'd be very powerful.
Yeah, and that's playing. So I love this one, begin with the end in mind, because I also chose chess pieces because, Dave, you asked us to challenge the group that's here. And I think, you know, this is a great group to challenge because I think your strategic advantage moving forward is playing chess while other people are playing checkers, right? If you really understand and start to begin with what you want and what you want to get back, and you start to contractually have the discussions, right? I'm not talking about I need this data row tied to this data row tied to this data row. But what you heard Chris and I do was out of order. What Chris didn't know what to feed me from an informational perspective, because in pre-construction, we didn't determine what those goals and standards were. And in design, we didn't decide what those goals and standards in engineering. And so that whole team needs to come together. And it's why I'm a big fan of the modern contract that incorporates, you know, think more on the IPD, the design build world, where, you know, we kind of all have a stake in the game and we all have an opportunity to drive more profit in all of our pockets, but also to deliver a better experience. The number of construction projects I've been a part of where everybody goes, oh my God, that's over. Let's do it again. Like, nobody's going, woohoo, that was awesome. Let's build another one. That's on us. That's on design, engineering, general contractors, trade contractors. It's on the people who build the buildings, right? And thinking that as we go down the road, how do we incorporate and ingest the critical information from those facilities managers, make it available to them, but also feed it back to us to make better decisions, right? Now that we know 10 years down the road, how did those systems, how did the maintenance of those systems, just Dave, like, I know there was probably ways Kaiser got that information back, but we don't do that systematically. And we're obviously probably missing tons of areas, whether it be, you know, how often pumps fail in certain things, how often other types of, you know, how often filters, et cetera, need to be replaced, how often certain machinery is living and ending its life cycle. And we've got all these things we're leaving in the ground when it comes to IoT and all those other other new devices that can provide us those insights. We can also learn from constructability. Like there's this moment now where it's swords drawn, RFI change order, right? But what if, because of the contract and because we've set up an understanding of the different data that's going to pass, that it's a question. So we're passing a question, we're understanding why a decision was made, we're getting that answer back, and we're making a decision. And then we can say, we made a mistake. Like, hey, next time we design this, let's make a different decision here, because ultimately it drove a problem for us down the road. It's not a fault, it's an improvement. It's continuously taking a step forward and improving. Like Chris said, just handing over Struction Site's 360 x-rays of this is what it looked like before the walls were on, facilities is getting a bonus from that already. You've given them a carrot. Right? That carrot is going to entice them to want the next carrot, to want the next bite. And by playing chess, you're thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 steps down the road on how to continually drive adoption and drive people to understand what data it is we need to connect together and why. Not all data needs to connect. And I love this. This is why I picked Chris, because I use him in a lot of speeches. Because I came from an ERP replacement world. For about 4 years, I spent my life replacing ERP systems. And my favorite thing was, Jeff, it just has to integrate. And I'd go, what do you mean by that? And they'd be like, well, it has to integrate. I got all the information from everywhere, it has to go everywhere. I'm like, really? Have you met Struction Site? You really want their 360 videos and photos that are huge in your system? And I'll do this because Chris isn't selling, and I appreciate that. But they do something called Smart Track, which can kind of give you a production levels and give you information back on how much drywall and framing you're doing and how you're progressing. Well, that I want, because ultimately I estimated this much, and in design I knew there was going to be this much, and in general I estimated it was going to be this much, which came through a trade contractor. And now Chris's system is telling me, how am I tracking to all that? Remember before we talked about democratizing? This is all of that coming together. And what do I need? I need one data field. I do not need all of the ways that he gave that to me. It's a very particular piece, but it's why I picked, Chris to join me on this journey, because it shows you the level of specificity, but also the ease. Like, that is not a tough integration to do. It's a single cost code that has its own, category, and it goes right to a uni format or master format, back to your estimate. You can drive all that information back. So that's what we mean when we start to say begin with the end in mind. Have an understanding. Not everything needs to go everywhere. But what does? Like an RFI from a project management system. Project management systems are generating tons of data that none of us need but the construction company, right? That they're watching their financials, they're paying their people, they're running their payroll. All of that is of zero use to you. You don't care. You never should care. However, the RFI that was generated, why was it generated? What decision did it come from? How can we trace it back to its origin so that we can prevent it in the future? Everybody talks about zero RFI jobs. Yeah, okay, great. That's a great want, but that means we're probably just not asking the question. We're probably just not putting it down on paper. We want to know. So I hope that kind of gives you a continuum as how Chris and I wanted to kind of twist your minds. And I'll open it up. Like, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Chris, if you have any feedback on that one, because I know I've had a lot of fun with this, with data over time.
And I want to do a little time check. We have a little bit less than 15 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought you guys had some slides. I don't know whether you have anything you want to share that way. I love the energy of the conversation. So.
No, we have a few slides in case we were behind. Like, we've already talked about how the data drives those decisions. This was meant to be a real conversation. We know sometimes, I think the world's getting Zoom burned out. I'm going to release an article on Zoom burnout over time. Like, you're probably all doing a few other things. I get it. But we've already talked about how data drives decisions. And there's two different things when you want to think about it. You want to think about data creation. We really touched on a lot of this already. BIM. As soon as you're modeling, you're creating data. Dave, I looked up GeoPogo. That pretty much can't exist unless you have a model, right? So,
Well,
like,
you can have a point cloud, but you need some data.
yes. Yeah, you need something to do it. And that, we talked about challenging the group that's listening in and hopefully listens in later when they have some time. And all these different pieces that you see, I think we've covered BIM, laser scanning, IoT, project management, ERP, mobile devices. Those are all your data creating areas. These are all the devices that are starting to generate this ability to almost do a rewind. Like we had this on the Contact crew at one point. We talked about how technology is going to reach a moment where between things like smart vid, cheap cameras, laser scanning, integration of site scanning, things like Versatile that go on your crane hooks that, kind of tell you information about schedule and materials moving around. It's going to be able to replay an entire job. Like it's going to have instant replay. It's going to be like watching a football game. Go back to when that was done. We want it to be there. But these are all the technologies that are creating that data. And let's spend the last few minutes talking about the technologies that are consuming the data. And I think the reason construction was chosen as the place for a lot of the technology and investment was because it can also then be consumed and drive uphill innovation. And that's where you as designers and architects can really play a different game and change the way the world is built. I think that's through things like generative design. So it's really easy to understand. And before I get into this, I talk about this in construction. Every time we talk about robotics, we talk about augmenting, right? Nothing that you're going to hear Chris and I talk about is that we want to get rid of designers, that we want to unseat them or disrupt them. You'll hear a lot of us talk about disruption. I really particularly try not to anymore because it's not about disrupting. It's about augmenting the humans and making humans more efficient at doing what they do well. And that's making decisions.
Mm.
So Chris, I'm going to pull something you kind of talked about before, like designers want to build, and why one of the reasons we stayed away from it was because of the creativity, right? But only about 20 to 30, 40% of a building is really the creative part. I don't think anyone would sit down and think like my HVAC and electrical and my fire suppression system are,
They're so sexy.
Yeah, they're so sexy. They're why people buy stuff. No, that's 80% of blocking and tackling, right? So with generative design, you can do multiple different things. You can set out a set of parameters, and I believe in not too distant future, you will be designing your buildings how you want and leaving for a while, and the models will start to generate different ways for the systems to come together and different solutions to the set of problems that you've given it. That's what generative design does. Chris, any input, or Dave, any input on kind of how generative design works right now?
No.
I don't have a comment.
Okay, so that
Does
and
anybody else have a comment on it?
yeah, if anybody else is having, like, there's things like test fit. Like, I'm a big, huge fan of test fit right now. It's testfit.io. Clifton Harness is their CEO, and I challenge him a lot because he is the guy that talks a little bit about disruption. But what testfit's been able to do is take that iterative process around determining whether a certain, it was started with buildings, it's actually entire developments right now, are feasible for a developer to do. That used to be a very back and forth long process with architects on redesigning and understanding how many floors can I get in, how many rooms can I get in, give me a rough idea of this, is this possible? That was a 2-week, 4-week, lots of time. With TestFit, you can do that in minutes right now. And you can really help a developer decide if a project is viable. They don't take it and build it from there. They take it, hand it over to the people that are really good at it, and then they fill it in and actually get more out of it, because that's what the human is really good at. They get the base, they design from there. The reason I think that's important right now more than ever is going into 2021. Every one of us in this industry has to find ways to get owners off the bench and in the game.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So I have something to say about that. Okay.
If,
So you talk about test fit, and a lot of architects do look at those computational design tools as competition.
Mhm.
Like, nobody's going to hire me to do it. They're tools for architects more than for anyone else. And it allows you to actually deliver your services in some cases more efficiently and effectively. So you can take on projects that you might not have been able to take on before. So architecture only, we're only eating a small part of the pie. To begin with, we're only working on 1% of residential projects, and we're only working on 25% of all buildings. So what about the rest of the pie? Don't you want to eat that too? And when you go out in the cities, when you go out, you really want to eat some of that, because it doesn't look like it tastes very good out there. It's not designed by architects, and you feel like you could do it better. Well, you have to find a way to do it.
Yep. And find a way to burn off your waste, and look at it as your strategic advantage over other people. You can do more in less time and take on more work and provide a higher quality product. And imagine, like you said, the owner could have this, or you could have it, and you could walk up to the owner and say, my competitor is going to take 4-6 weeks to get you an answer every time you change something. I'll have it for you tomorrow. I'll have it for you tonight. Let's sit down and go through it. I'm the expert. Make the tool your tool. I mean, you talk about Luddites back in the day. One of the things that plumbers thought was the end of their job was welding. Now, what do most plumbers do? They weld, right? The innovation augments and provides us an opportunity to do more and have a strategic advantage. So, generative design from the test fit side does those kind of things. We've seen some others come up over time that are looking at piping and looking at options for, retrofits and other things to really understand where things can be run, because it's just a set of parameters. And even then, going over top and checking designs to make sure, hey, we've put enough room in these walls. We're constantly trying to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, and we can't do that. So these things help us. And then, we have AI and machine learning. So you guys know there's no real AI yet. It's very what's called specific AI. We've gone in and we've given it the parameters that we know. A good identification of that, something like SmartVid. SmartVid was able to use humans to point out what things were. The machine was able to go through billions of pictures and figure out over time how to identify it themselves. Real machine learning or AI would do that on its own. So that could be considered AI or machine learning. Deep learning is understanding trends, and that's where we take all of this data that we talk about and we really democratize it, analyze it, and we learn things we didn't see coming.
Good.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted, time check again. 4 minutes left.
4 minutes left, and this is it.
Give both of you guys a chance to wrap up some final thoughts on your part.
Yeah, and I was done there. Chris, if you want to give a wrap up, I'll give a wrap up. Hey guys, this is our contact information. So Chris, feel free, and I'll close it out. I don't have a hard stop. I'm here if people want to stay afterwards and ask a few questions. I can stick around.
We can keep it open. Did you put your contact info in the chat?
I did not, but I will also, as part of AIA, we have to share this with you. So I will share this so you can share it with the group. But I will put that in, Chris, while you close up.
Yeah, I just really want to say thanks to everybody for spending a little bit of time with us. Like, I know people are sort of Zoom webinared out for sure. And I know it's pretty late for a lot of folks. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for taking the time. Really, this is just an opportunity for us to try to share, some of the lessons that we're learning through our time in construction technology, and realizing how much of this is a joint effort, for everybody to be able to create, share, use data across the project partner, across the project partnership. And I'm really excited to get feedback and hear, ultimately how, what I want to do again is I want to learn more about how we can connect that circle, right? From design to build to manage, back to design to build to manage to operate, even is probably an even better word than manage.
Yeah.
And ultimately kind of learn how we can, use data to not just improve, the project of designing a building, but really thinking about extending that through to the life of the building, and really being able to figure out how we can like improve the process of creating and living in these buildings that really are more, living organisms in ways that we don't really think about. So, looking forward to feedback on that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's it.
Yeah, no, just building on what you're saying. When you look at the operation of a building, there's a revenue opportunity there for architects. The architect is already a trusted advisor to the owner. And if you are managing the data for them about their building, there's no reason why that can't be an ongoing activity. And some architecture firms now even have staff embedded in companies. And that's what they do. They handle those issues for the owner. That's a fantastic opportunity for architects. I also want to say that architecture already uses a lot of databases to do the Title 24 calculations. That's all based upon databases. Structure, that's all based upon data. So a challenge to the designers is, now that we can collect more data, what is the data that we want and need to connect in order to do our work better?
Dave, that is a fantastic question. And that's hopefully the challenge that's laid out. For both Chris and I want to thank AIA San Francisco for bringing us in. It's a real awesome opportunity for us. We both are passionate, if you can't tell, about talking about this, about thinking about it. It's not our jobs necessarily to solve the problems. It's to ask the right questions and use you smart people to continue to elevate your practices and put this in, and then come back and feedback. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, engage with us. I do have to say that if we've earned it and you want to know what we do, take a look at both of our products. This is how we have the capability to do these things for free, and go out there and talk about it. Ultimately, no one pays us for our opinion on all the things that we've said, but somebody does, pay us in the end. So if you think you want to elevate your business in some way, shape, or form, or learn more about what we're doing, feel free. Also, if you want to engage and a question comes up later on, reach out. We're here. We're going to provide these slides to you. Not that they're of much, because it's very a conversational piece for us to do, but I really appreciate it. I'm really passionate about it. I can't wait to see this industry continue to reach its potential, and for me to change the experience in construction. It's all about the experience economy as we move forward. As you elevate what you can do, you provide a new level of enjoyment and experience, and that's how you rise above the rest and get a strategic advantage. So for me, that's my pitch at the end, and I appreciate, Dave, you having us. And I don't think Dennis got a chance to join, but hopefully he'll listen later, and I thank him for connecting us.
Okay. I want to thank you both. You did a great job. I think this is very inspirational. So I hope anybody who wants to hang out and talk for a few minutes with Chris and Jeff, just join in. But thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I turned off the share, so if you share your smiling faces, have questions, feel free.
Okay, and our next Design Tech event will be the third Wednesday of February. So look forward to seeing you then.
We get to do them all, right?
Yeah, it's just Chris and I, right? We're signed up for the entire series.
We just changed the theme, right? The topic.
Yeah, no, well, you set the bar pretty high. And for anybody who's still on, I'd like to encourage you to really, present your own ideas for what you'd like to learn about. And anybody who you think would be a valuable presenter. And we'll open the forum to them.
Yeah, we have lots of friends too in the industry that love to do this as well. So there's lots of great movements going on. Dave, you talked about it, but what Electry's doing, if you haven't seen it, is really kind of interesting in helping the industry understand the impacts of COVID. So It looks like people are rolling out. I
Yep.
get it though. It's 6 o'clock on the Pacific. They're probably heading out for
Yeah.
dinner at this point.
Or to order takeout, since that's how we roll these days, right?
Ah, man, I could love some takeout.
Right.
I live up in the mountains, man. We don't have, we don't have DoorDash. We don't have Uber Eats. We ain't got none of that.
You got to go hunt for it out back,
Yeah,
right?
you gotta hunt.
Yeah, I got to hunt, man, skin that thing. And, so, all right. Well, I think
Okay.
that is it. Dave, I really appreciate it. Carson, thanks for getting everything set up. It's super smooth. Really appreciate that. Doing these for a while, and it's always fun to just
Okay.
have it. And I will rip this into PDF and send it to Dave, you, and Carson, because I believe, Carson, that's part of the deal is you have to provide this out to everybody who joined.
Okay.
All right.
Hey,
Yeah.
later, Michael. Nice
Okay.
to see you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad I saw this come through and glad I got an opportunity to join.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, Jeff and Chris, I'll probably follow up with both of you and do a little networking afterwards.
Yeah, one of these days we'll get back to like actually having in-person networking opportunities. I'm sure I'll run into you one of these days soon.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm looking
Okay.
forward to real in-person events again.
So am I.
No doubt.
Me too.
All right,
Look
thanks,
forward to
Dave.
seeing you
Thanks,
guys.
Carson.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.